In this video, we will be making the single rib stitch fingerless glove beginning to end. This is how it turns out. It's got a longer thumb, so you can make a half thumb if you would like. My hands get very, very cold, so I wanted some that went up a little higher. Even on the hands here, this one goes up a little higher, but as you can see, if you would like, you can roll them down. I prefer mine up, but the yarn, being a wool blend, is very, very warm, and you do want to hand wash it even though it says it is machine washable. Still hand wash this. If you wish to use a different yarn, you want to go with something that is a medium worsted weight yarn to get the same size. The stitches we'll just be using the purl stitch and the U-stitch. And this is what the PDF looks like. It will be the QR code and direct video link. I'm going to set that over to the side for now. Let's set up our loom to begin with. I am doing a size small because I have itty bitty tiny hands. And the size small is just right here at these pink pegs. You're placing the wedge in between. This is peg 1, so between peg 9 and, if you count around, that's 24. So this is where the wedge goes. The hand part of the glove will be made on this section. We will do the thumb over here. Since we are doing a rib stitch, it's going to be the exact same through the entire project. What I'm going to do is I'm marking every other peg. The marked pegs will be purled the entire project. I'm even putting I'm going ahead and marking the ones for the thumb section as well. We are going to use a double E-wrap cast on. Gives a lot of stretch. This is the tail of the yarn down through the middle, and I'm just going to wrap it there just to hold it in place. Now for this cast on, you do it one peg at a time, and you go ahead and you wrap it 2 times. You're going to take this second one over the top, go to your next peg, wrap it 2 times. Second over the top. You can tighten it up some if you would like. Round 1 through 15 will be purl 1, knit 1. You can use the true knit stitch, flat stitch, or the U-stitch. For larger hands, you can even use the E-wrap stitch if you would like. I will be using the U-stitch. So that is what I'm going to show. But we will purl the first stitch. And you take that off and put the new stitch on. And then knit stitch of choice, which this was wrote up for the U-stitch. Purl again. U-stitch. I do have individual videos to show you these separate stitches a little better if you need. The first 15 rounds are done. That's this part right here, the finger opening. Now we are going to do the thumb. First thing we're going to do is empty off this wedge, so the stitch from peg 01 will move over here. The stitch from peg 02 will move over here. We're going to loosen the wedge, and since we are on the size small, which are the pink pegs, we are going to move the wedge up to the next set of pink pegs and tighten it back up. You're going to see there's 2 marked pegs right next to each other, so I'm just going to pop that stitch marker off of that one, put it on the peg next to it, and now we're going to add in our second wedge. This one, we want the slits in it to be facing the opposite direction of the other one, and we're going to place it between the purple pegs. The thumb will only be worked on those pegs right there. So go ahead and put this on here and tighten it up. As you can see, it does overlap a bit, but that is okay. And I've already got a stitch marker here, or a peg marker here, so that we keep the same pattern going. We will be going back to working in the rounds, so I'm actually leaving the yarn attached here. If you want, you can cut it and weave it in later. But what I'm doing is I'm using the yarn from the opposite side, from the outside of the spool instead of the inside. So for these pegs right here, which will have a loom adjuster between peg 10 and 23, and one between peg 12 and 21, we're going to chain cast on. Start with a slip knot. And we're working in this direction, so I want to keep working in the same direction. I'm going to start with peg 02 here. And we are doing our chain cast on. Take that slip knot behind. And do this all the way around. Back at our last peg, so I'll just put that loop right on there. Now we're going to restart our pattern, so we will be doing 15 rounds of, it'll be knit 1, purl 1. You'll just be following your stitch markers. They're already marked out for you. So you'll go back to whatever knit stitch you are using. And then, of course, you will do your purl stitch, knit stitch, purl stitch, knit stitch for 10 rounds. The thumb is done, so we don't need this wedge anymore. We're going to remove it the same way we did the other wedge, just by moving the stitches over. And if the stitches are tight, that's okay. As you can see, that second one was really tight for me. Now you can go ahead and remove the wedge. Put that over to the side. And there is your thumb section. I'm going to go ahead and pull these down because that's what you're going to use to stitch this right there together. We are back to our original strand of yarn. Now you just work 10 rounds in the same single rib stitch, your purl 1, knit 1. there's a purl. Of course, I'll show you when you get up to the pegs with 2 wedges, you're going to treat both strands. Both strands you treat as one. This is a purl stitch, and it's very tight on there. So luckily, these pegs have a little give to them. I knit very, very, very tight. The second one here, separate, it has 2 stitches, and that is my knit one. So you can take the stitches over one at a time if you're worried it's going to pop the main stitch off, or if your tension is too tight. Continue on with 10 rounds. This is where we're at. It's time to decrease for this wrist, which the way it decreases a little different because we're keeping those purl stitches in, and it kind of gives sort of a U look. So even if there are 2 purl stitches next to each other, if it's a purl, you keep it a purl. If it's a knit, you keep it a knit. But right now, we are going to move these to here. And to do so, we're going to take the stitch off peg 12 here. I can zoom that in for you, I suppose. Take that stitch off peg 12 and put it on peg 01 of the wedge. Then we're going to go over to peg 21 and move that to peg 02. We're going to loosen this up just a little bit, and we're going to fill in this gap so that they are in between. I guess loosen it up. You want it in between the blue, or whichever size you're making, you're going down one, and you will be working back to your original collar. Okay, where's my strand? Over here. So now you will keep up with your pattern, and you are going to work 2 rounds, keeping those stitches. So we got purl, purl, knit, knit for these 2 rounds. So go ahead and get that done. Time for another decrease. We will be doing the same thing. Take the stitch from peg 22, place it on peg 02, and then take the stitch from peg 11, place it on peg, I dropped it, place it on peg 01. Again, we're going to loosen that up and push it between the purple. As you can see, this time it's going to be knit, purl, knit, purl. Go ahead and work 2 more rounds. Our final decrease, so the stitch from peg 10 to peg 01, the stitch from peg 23 to 02. We will loosen this up a bit, move it again, and see we are back to our original pegs. You are going to work 2 rounds. Once the 2 rounds are done, to make it easier on myself, I will be taking the stitch marker from peg 01 and placing it on peg 02. The reason I'm switching these back is because here we are at the end. We're going back to the original way these were marked. That way you have that same ribbing all the way to the end. So go ahead and you're going to be working 30 rounds. Remember, you'll do your first 2, and then this will go from purl to knit, then purl. Go ahead and get that worked up, and I'll show you the cast off. well, the bind off, sorry. I do suggest taking a stitch marker and placing it on a peg. I would do a knit peg. It's easier to just flip that over than to do the way the purl stitch does and keep track of your rows. I find it the best if every 5 or 10 rounds I put another stitch marker. That way I can go back and keep an accurate count of how many I've got. We are using a basic bind off. Zoom this in. There are 3 steps to this basic bind off. Step 1 is you E-wrap your first 2 pegs and knit over. Step 2, you take the stitch from the second peg where your working yarn is coming from, move it back to the first peg, knit over. Step 3, you move this over and fill in that gap. Show you again. E-wrap your first 2 and knit over. That is your step 1. Step 2, you're going to take the stitch from the second peg where the working yarn is coming from, move it back 1 to that first peg, knit over. Step 3, fill in the gap. You'll continue to do this all the way around the loom until you're back at the very last stitch left. At our last 2, step 1, step 2, and take and cut the working yarn. Use your loom tool and pull the working yarn through the last stitch on the loom. Take it off, and there you go. The only thing left to do is to weave your ends in and sew up the hole right here, which I've got a tapestry needle right here. You can see where I put my stitch markers while I was counting my rows. Okay, so I want to find all the little strands. There we go. First, I'm going to thread my needle, which I found this as kind of a shortcut, and I think it's really cool. Just pull the yarn over, you hold it kind of tight, and you slip it through it and pushes it together in a little knot, and then you pull it through. So I thought that was kind of neat. Anyway, here's how I like to sew the hole up, because I'm going to be the one wearing them, so I want to make sure I sew it up correctly. You can do like a mattress seam. You can stitch it up however you would like. If I can find a good angle. Here we go. I'm just picking up stitches from both sides. I'm just pulling them together until there's no holes left. Oh, if I can catch it. There we go. right. Let's pull it through here. Tighten that up. I've got a thin spot right here, so I will go ahead back and fill that in. There we go. I'm going to just pull it through some stitches. You want to go in some different directions, and that will lock it in place. And if you're using the same yarn or any yarn that is a wool-based yarn, eventually it's going to felt together. See, that was excessive. I didn't really need to pull it down that far. But you do that, then you just cut that strand, you weave this down through your cast on and your cast off. But let's turn it inside out and have a look. Alright, so this is finished pair, how they turned out. One thing that's kind of neat is this part of the hand started to swirl. It's called pulling, and it made kind of a little design on them, so I like that. Right, any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. A link for the PDF will be in the video description, and thank you so much for watching.